Welcome in to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. We've got an exciting show today, folks. And I'll tell you, we're going to start it off today with a book, an intriguing book that I read over the weekend. And it's a book about a couple that is on a romantic trip in the Death Valley region of Eastern California. And a couple that had had some issues up until this with their relationship. Now, they're not your typical couple. The man in the relationship comes from a wealthy family, and he's kind of spurning that wealth. He's taken on a more of a metaphysical counterculture type living and religion. And he's taken on a wife in a kind of a non-traditional relationship. He's younger, she's older. And we'll get into this with our guest, Doug Kari, who's written this excellent book that we're going to discuss today. The name of the book is The Berman Murders, Unraveling the Mojave Desert's Most Mysterious Unsolved Crime. And basically the couple is Louise Berman and Barry Berman. And they're driving to the Saline Valley. It's a counterculture mecca. They make it to that mecca, but there's some danger that ensues from there. And we'll tell you more about that danger as we get into the rest of the program here in just a moment. Again, the book is The Berman Murders, Unraveling the Mojave Desert's Most Mysterious Unsolved Crime. Our guest is the author of that book, Doug Kari. Let me tell you a little bit about Doug before we introduce him into the program here. Doug investigates true crime stories firsthand and in depth. He's a confirmed adventurer and wrote about the Marquesas Islands after accessing remote villages by four-wheel drive. He undertook the first end-to-end traverse of the Inyo Mountains as a fundraiser for a rural hospital, securing pledges for each summit he climbed. Doug's true crime stories have run on the front pages of LA Weekly, Las Vegas Review-Journal, San Francisco Daily Journal, and other respected outlets. An English major at UC Berkeley, Doug honed his writing skills under novelist and professor Leonard Michaels of the Men's Club fame. After receiving his law degree at UC Law San Francisco, Doug practiced IP law while doing pro bono wilderness protection work for desert survivors, an outdoor group that he co-founded. Doug also has some other works out there. He also has an excellent blog at his website, dougkari.com, which we have linked to in the description of this program. The book we're talking about today, of course, is The Berman Murders. Let's welcome in to True Crime Tuesday, Doug Kari. Doug, welcome in to True Crime Tuesday, despite my stumbling and fumbling.
Tim, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
First of all, I tip my cap to you. A wonderful book about this mystifying case and some other things that go on with our lead suspect, which we'll talk about here during the program. Let's get into, first of all, the victims in our case, and let's talk about this backstory here. We'll start with Barry Berman, who grows up kind of a child of privilege, which is quite interesting in itself. I'm always fascinated by people who grow up with the silver spoon, yet spurn that silver spoon. I think that's such an amazing statement of character, I guess is the way I want to put it, Doug. Someone who has every advantage in life, yet says, you know what? I want to be my own person. And I want to find my own way. Tell us a little bit about Barry Berman, would you?
Well, Barry Berman was very much like you described, Tim. I think you've really captured his personality in your summary there. Barry was born into really fabulous wealth. His father was an enormously successful Southern California entrepreneur. It seemed like everything he got into just blossomed into massive amounts of money. He started in the liquor business as a young man right out of Ohio State, and he opened a liquor store in Beverly Hills, built that up into a chain of 6 stores, and eventually sold it, made himself a small fortune. But then after World War II, after serving as an officer in the Navy, Barry's father, Jules Berman, then goes back into the liquor business and becomes a distributor. And he is very attuned to trends that are taking place, and particularly as servicemen and women returned from overseas, they brought back an interest and a taste in the exotic, in foreign brands. He spotted this trend and capitalized on it by going and looking for foreign brands that might do well in the United States. And his first big hit, he met with a brewer, had a unique tasting beer called Heineken that they were looking to promote in the U.S. market. And he was so successful that he made a fortune right out the gate with Heineken, and then moved on to things like J&B Scotch and Bass Pale Ale and other hits in the alcoholic beverage world. Then an opportunity arose for him to buy an obscure Mexican liqueur that was selling fewer than 1,000 cases a year called Kahlua. And It was really through his ingenious promotion that he plowed money into advertising and built this into $1 million a case year business, and the wealth just poured in. He had a yacht named Kahlua. He had a mansion in Beverly Hills. He not only had a lodge on the shores of Lake Arrowhead, which is this beautiful lake in the mountains above Los Angeles, he put together a deal with partners. They bought the entire lake. They bought 3,000 acres of surrounding woodlands, bought the adjoining village, developed a golf course, and that became a huge hit. He got involved in other mega real estate deals. He got involved in oil. The man just had a way with money. Well, Jules and his wife, Ruth, a well-bred New York woman from a wealthy family, they only had one child, and that was Barry. And Barry, from the time he was just a little boy, I interviewed in particular his childhood best friend, who's now you might characterize him as a celebrity plastic surgeon. And he told me that Barry just was exactly as you described, Tim. He just was never that interested in his parents' money. And growing up in a household where his dad was gone a lot doing deals and his mother was sort of this stern and aloof figure and the servants were raising him, he developed a different set of values. And he really was not taken at all by his parents' lifestyle.
You eloquently put it, Doug, in the book as he never fought his father on it, though. It was never an affront to him that the money was there, because he would take gifts from his father. So if his father wanted to reward his son with something, it was okay. It was just that, he never flaunted it either in front of his friends, which was good. But it was just, he wanted to make his own way. Is that fair to say?
It is, Tim. And I think more than that, he just was a person who didn't want to subsume himself in wealth. He recognized that he came from a very wealthy family, and his parents, because they didn't show him love, they would shower him with any kind of material goods that he wanted, but he self-regulated in that manner. Yes, he accepted things from his father. He didn't completely shun his family, but he just dialed it way down and tried to keep it in check so that it didn't become a defining feature. His friends all told me the same story separately about a time when Barry came home from college. He briefly attended a college in San Luis Obispo, and up on the Central California coast. He came back to Beverly Hills and he wanted to, go visit friends. And the only cars that were available to drive were exotic cars, Ferrari, Maserati, Rolls Royce. And Barry just wouldn't be seen in a car like that. He told his dad, rent me a Ford. Wow. And that kind of epitomized him. Not that he just said, you know what, I'm out of here and rejecting his parents, but simply that he didn't want to define himself by wealth the way his parents really defined their lives by wealth. That was Barry Berman.
I suppose Jules had to look at him kind of with a side eye, like, rent me a Ford. I could just see it, but in a way, you would think Jules had to kind of respect that he wanted to be his own man.
I think Jules did respect his son and his son's choices. And it was clear that the father and son, although they really didn't understand each other at all, they loved each other.
Yeah.
And there was a respect, but they were just very different people, very different sorts of characters. And this emerged from the time that Barry was young. According to Dr. Larry Kaplan, who again is now you could call him a celebrity plastic surgeon, but at the same time, he also has some of that characteristic where he's not, even though he works in that world, he's not a man who defines himself by wealth. He and Barry share that in common, where they're very deep thinkers, thoughtful, and they place all of that in perspective because they know that that's temporal. You don't take that with you, and that shouldn't define your worldly existence because it's simply material goods. Now, that's easy to say, not as easy to do. I joke with people sometimes. Oh, if I had $1 billion, I would I'd buy a bunch of exotic cars, and I'd date cheerleaders and fly private all over the world. But I wouldn't let it change me. But I think, in all seriousness, when I make that joke, what I'm saying is really that it's very hard not to have that kind of wealth and access to that kind of wealth change you and start to define you. And when I say that, I don't know if I would have the strength of character like Barry does to be able to regulate himself in that manner. As a writer, I like to think of myself as being thoughtful and having a perspective on life and existence that where I wouldn't get sucked into a hole like that, because wealth like that really can swallow a person. And Barry recognized that. He didn't want to get swallowed up into that world. He wanted to view the world through a completely different lens. And his friends respected him enormously for that. He was universally described as being kind of monk-like, a man of few words. Even from the time he was young, thoughtful, a deep thinker, and that was Barry Berman, an extraordinary person who had a lot of impact on the people around him.
And a man of great discipline, too. You have to be, I think, in order to be kind of surrounded by the trappings of success and riches, and yet still be focused on wanting to be one with the metaphysical and the spiritual. I think it's tough to be tough of mind and tough of body, and yet I think the best way to put it, Doug, is to push off the trappings of vanity. Because it is in the trappings of riches, because I don't want to paint it as being sinful, because it's not. It's successful is what it is. And his father is very successful. And his father, I think you do, again, I use the word eloquent a lot here, but I think you eloquently put the comparing and the contrasting here of Jules versus Barry, and that Jules very much enjoys his success. He doesn't flaunt it, but he enjoys it. And his wife very much enjoys the success as well. She, as you put it in the book, she's not necessarily the I'll bake you some cookies and make you some cocoa type of mom. She doesn't dote on the neighborhood kids nor her son that way. She's very much a mahjong playing, social club type mom. So in that, she enjoys the trappings of her riches, which is fine. That's if you have it, go for it, right? It's what you do with what you have. But I think with Jules, I think he very much enjoyed what he had and developed it in his way, which is fine. It's what he chose to do with his path. I think had Barry lived and inherited that, I think we would have saw a different change with the riches that he would have inherited. I want to play what if with you, and and the reason why I'm going this way with this what if scenarios is I want to ask you this what if question. What do you think Barry would have done had he inherited the Berman fortune?
I think Barry would have continued to live the way that he was living. I don't think that being in the driver's seat with the fortune would have suddenly changed his character. His character had emerged from the time he was young, and I think he would have continued to work with his hands as a craftsman, crafting decorative iron works, gates and lamps and things like that made of wrought iron. That was how he defined his profession, and I think he would have just continued to move forward, and that the essential Barry Berman would not have been unchanged. I think that the weight of the wealth would have caused him to have to make some decisions about how he's going to manage it, but I think he probably would have managed it with a mind for philanthropy, and he would have continued to lead a simple lifestyle, because that was the choice he made. He didn't need to wait for his father's wealth to enjoy the trappings. His dad was ready to just let him live large if that's how he wanted to live. And Barry simply was not interested in that. It was a choice. And some of that, I think, was driven by his religion. He, as a young man, when he ventured across the world, essentially trying to find himself, and he found his way into an ashram in India and became the disciple of a Punjabi guru. That gave him a sense of something larger than just this worldly existence. And of course, it was through that association that he met his wife, Louise, who had come, she'd been a survivor of sexual abuse. She'd come from a working class background and with a mother who was just cycled through lovers and husbands, and she had been abused and was somebody who had to struggle a lot. And Barry was her fourth husband. He was 17 years younger. He was possibly had never been with a woman before, whereas she'd had many lovers. But Barry didn't see people for who they are on the surface. He recognized something in her soul that touched him. And the two of them, after going through a phase in 1985 where they almost broke up, had reconnected when they went out to the desert. And that speaks volumes of Barry as well, that he really did choose these kinds of values, not just as a way of rebelling or pushing back against his father, but because those were the values that he deeply held. Those were the values that defined him as a person. And the two of them were just remarkably gentle, loving people who wouldn't eat meat because they believe slaying animals results in bad karma. Mm-hmm. And Louise, for all the trauma and the discord in her past, and the brief time she'd been in jail, and the hard drug use and everything, had emerged from all of that as a very centered and spiritual woman, and someone who had just boundless positive energy. And she made a nice counterpoint from what everyone described. Friends described them as being really a fun couple, because you had Barry, this very pensive, kind of thoughtful, meditative type of person, and Louise much more sparkly and engaging, and they were quite well liked and respected by their circle of friends.
Let's talk about Louise real quick and how the two of them initially get together, because Barry had an interest in a woman previously, but she kind of spurned him a little bit. The feeling wasn't quite mutual. So Barry has to move on. How does he meet Louise, and how do the two of them eventually get together?
Barry doesn't have access to a lot of single women. The lifestyle that he was leading was very much an ascetic kind of lifestyle. Barry was in 1985 living, in 1980 when he met Louise, was living on a corner of his father's ranch north of Santa Barbara. By that time, Jules had bought 3,500 acres of magnificent ranch land that fronted the Pacific Ocean. And there was a slice of this land, about a 12-acre parcel with little cottages on it, that had a private beach. And Barry was living there, and he met Louise at a satsang that is kind of like religious meeting or service of people who are disciples of Charan Singh and adherents of the religion Radha Swami, and she needed a place to live, so he had a room in his little cottage and he offered to rent it to her. And it was really because of that happenstance that they got together. Louise was very engaging with men. She was probably attracted to Barry right away, and she had a way with men, and Barry certainly would have warmed up to this lovely woman. She was 17 years older than him, but she had a very engaging way, a very beautiful woman, and with bright blue eyes. You can really see how they would have gotten together. And opposites attract, and they had that connection of the shared religion, and that led them to get married, because under the precepts of Radha Swami, as one of their close friends told me, you marry the person you're sleeping with.
An interesting philosophy, but hey, I mean, that's kind of most religions, isn't it? You marry the person you're sleeping with.
I think it is a tenet of most religions, and it is a way that does tend to lead to stability and commitment. And I think these are values that are championed by many religions, and certainly by Radha Swami, a relatively conservative religion. You think of these transcendental meditation religions as being sort of edgy or spacey, but they're deeply rooted in the culture of India and the idea that the soul, that the Hindu idea that the soul passes through multiple lifetimes. Radha Swami built off of that, and Barry and Louise both had this perspective where they believed that their soul journey was timeless. The time that they would be occupying this mortal plane and a particular body was limited, and wasn't, in the long-term look of things, really that important or significant. It was the soul's journey was what was important, not the particular body that you inhabit in any given lifetime. And their friends who were also adherents of this religion, after Barry and Louise turned up murdered, they were able to put it in perspective that I think I might have trouble doing. They said it doesn't matter how you die. It's really not important how you die, because your soul is simply moving on from there. Yeah.
It is kind of, and the way that they did put it is almost kind of beautiful. And they do also kind of say, that I think the way you put it is, they almost are kind of wishing that people would, how did you put it? That they would kind of want them to move on? Is that how you put it in the book? That they would want people to move forward with life and move on? And how did you put it exactly, Doug?
Well, very, very much so, that they would want you to get on with it.
Yeah, that's it.
And continue that journey, and not be too occupied by a particular set of circumstances. But I think for other friends and family, and certainly for Jules and Ruth, that's easier said than done. In fact, from what I understand, both Jules and Ruth had passed away long before I started this project, but they were devastated and never recovered. Apparently, Ruth Berman in particular just never recovered from the loss of her son, was completely shattered emotionally. And Jules was definitely embittered. And all that wealth that he had gathered and created in his lifetime, it just sort of went into the universe. I mean, it helped fund some charitable organizations. I'm sure important things came out of it, but you kind of wonder what was the purpose of it all. And I think he wondered that too. He was asked in his oral history, do you subscribe to any religion? And he said, well, I used to be religious, but I'm not anymore, since my son and daughter-in-law went for a walk in the desert and were murdered for no apparent reason. If there is a God, he's not my God. He's not the God for me. He's the God for other people. Now that's a very painful thing to say, and I really feel for him. And I think everybody who was there and kind of surrounding the event, it was clear that they just felt awful for the suffering that Jules Berman endured.
Painful, sad, and tragic. You know, Doug, but if you think about it, and I mean, if you want to look into that, the religious beliefs that Barry had, those riches that Jules had amassed, some of them going to charity or back into charitable organizations and doing good karmically, it almost went the way Barry would have wanted it, don't you think?
Yes, possibly. And interestingly, Tim, when I went out and searched for the gravesite, to just back up for a second,
sure.
Saline Valley is a remarkable location. The Bermans had gone on a makeup trip after having some marital difficulties in 1985. They start the new year 1986 by taking a camping trip out to the desert in a four-wheel drive pickup truck. They end up going into Saline Valley, which is now part of Death Valley National Park. At the time, it was just federal land in this very remote location. You think of California, everything as being accessible, but to get to Saline Valley, you have to go on a two-lane highway in the direction of Death Valley, and at a location where you're already out in literally, the middle of nowhere. You turn onto a rough dirt road and then drive another 50 miles, assuming it's even passable, to get into this pristine desert valley that's just so strikingly beautiful and quiet, with sand dunes and a saltwater lake. And in the middle of this untouched desert valley are these hot springs, natural hot springs that have been developed by hippie types and free spirits and beatniks and such over the years into an oasis of stone and cement bathing pools, soaking pools, where you can sit under the palm trees and soak in this hot mineral water. Barry and Louise get out to this remote location, and it's such a remarkable place to be, and to think that they lost their lives there is difficult, because it's just so beautiful. Yeah. When I went out to search for the gravesites, I kept thinking, as I looked around, I spent a lot of time trying to find the grave. It's in a particularly rugged and difficult to access location. And I just couldn't help but think, my gosh, they died in such a beautiful spot. And somehow I felt that with them, maybe they wouldn't be as sad as the people around them were. They truly did believe that their souls continued to live on, and that whatever happened out there, the horror of what happened, does not define who they are as people. It was just one step in this existence. It's a remarkable set of beliefs.
It is. With that, Doug, let's take our break. When we come back, let's talk about that act that does not define them as we know it, but the act that ends up defining a little bit of their story. We know it doesn't define them. They don't want it to define them, yet it does. It defines them in history. We'll put it that way. We'll talk about what happened with the Bermans. We'll talk about the main suspect, who has a very, let's just say, checkered past, and continues to have a checkered present. And we'll talk about a man by the name of Mike Pepe. That's coming up next. Believe it or not, his run-in with the Bermans is not his only run-in with the law. And we'll talk about that when we come back. The name of the book is The Berman Murders, Unraveling the Mojave Desert's Most Mysterious Unsolved Crime. Doug Kari is our guest and the author of this wonderful book. We have a link to it in the description of this program. We encourage you to go out and get it during the break. When we come back, what happened to the Bermans on that fateful night? We'll talk about that, and we'll talk about the main suspect in this case and what he is up to today. Let's put it this way. He's devious up until this very moment of this podcast. We'll talk about it more when we come back on the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. Welcome back to the best in true crime podcasting. This is True Crime Tuesday. I'm your host, Tim Dennis. Our guest is author Doug Kari. The book is The Berman Murders, Unraveling the Mojave Desert's Most Mysterious Unsolved Crime. When last we left you, we were talking about Barry and Louise Berman and that fateful night that they decided to go to the Saline Valley and try to make up basically a relationship that was on the rocks, a marriage that had started out blissfully and was slipping a little bit, but they decided to have a little bit of a second honeymoon, so to speak. They took off in their truck. They went to go explore the desert, the Mojave Desert. They decided to have a little bit of a nature trek, so to speak. They're going to do some hiking. They're going to I believe it's, they have some, is it saltwater baths out there? Or is it just hot spring baths is what it is, correct, Doug?
Hot springs, hot mineral water, drinkable water.
That's right. And just relax and get back to nature and reconnect with the earth. And they get out there, Doug, and when they get out there that first night, they get to those mineral baths and they meet some characters. And why don't you take it from there, Doug, and tell us, as they slip into their bathing suits, who it is they meet?
Well, normally, Tim, people bathe naked in the hot springs in Saline Valley. Not that it's a hookup spot; it's just kind of a get back to nature spot. And Barry and Louise weren't prudish, but they were reserved. Mm-hmm. And chances are that initially, coming to a spot they hadn't been to before, that they would have put on their bathing suits until they kind of sized up what the scene was. They arrived after dark, which shows you how confident Barry was in the out of doors, because driving into a place like that after dark is quite challenging. But they arrived safely after dark, changed into bathing suits, got into this beautiful pool with three men who were already there soaking under the stars. There were two young men in their 20s. They were motorcycle riders, dirt bike riders who had come out there to explore and have fun, kind of rambunctious guys. And then there was a fellow in his 30s. He identified himself as Mike, said that he was a military man. He had a rather mellow way of talking. He had a resonant voice, mentioned that he'd gone to college in New Mexico. And the five of them were chatting in the tub, getting to know each other. It was a moonless night, cold out because it's January, but very comfortable in the water and kind of an intimate feel. I've been there many times and just know that feeling where you've got the wilderness around you and the night is cold, but yet you're just so comfortable inside that water and talking with other folks. So eventually the two motorcycle riders go off to bed. Their companion, an older fellow, 10 years old or something, he's in his 30s. He actually was a little older than them, but he had gone off to bed already. He was kind of like the old man of the trip, and they were going to get up in the morning and go riding. So they go off to bed and they leave the Bermans in the hot tub with this fellow Mike. Well, early the next morning, another camper spots the Bermans with their little backpacks on, taking off up a very rough road that led away from the campground deeper into the wilderness. It ascended the one side of the valley floor as it headed into some of the most remote country in the western United States. And later, not too long later, Mike was seen unloading some gear out of the back of his truck and leaving it there in camp and kind of preparing for a day trip, like it would be very common out there. If you're going to take a vehicle, you get a shovel, some gas, some water, and he goes slowly driving up the same route that the Bermans had been seen going up. And then what happens is, at the end of the day, the Bermans haven't come back, but the truck with the military man driving is seen coming down this rough road back into camp. And the people who see this are a couple that have arrived just that day while while the folks are gone from camp, the motorcycle riders are gone. Everybody's kind of off doing their thing for the day. The Bermans are gone. Mike is gone. A couple comes into camp. They're kind of an interesting couple. They're mountaineers, well known in the Eastern Sierra. He was a bit older, very charismatic kind of a guy. And she was younger, very beautiful. And they arrive in camp and they spot this truck coming back into camp. And then Mike comes over to their camp and he seems jittery and he's covered in dirt. And he says, well, he had given up smoking, but he saw that they had some cigarettes. Could he trade them a can of peaches for a pack of cigarettes? So they said, sure. And they do that. And he seems all charged up to the point where he starts raising the idea with this young woman that he's just met. Well, why don't they all have a threesome? He starts floating the idea of a threesome. And she's just, appalled at this. And it's completely inappropriate. There's nothing that would indicate that would be appropriate conduct. Right. And she just wants to get him the heck out of there. And this set of circumstances that I just described is what gets law enforcement thinking that this fellow Mike might be the one responsible for the fact that the Bermans never come back to camp. Because if not him, who else? I mean, you've got the motorcycle riders, right? They rode off in the same direction under that same road. But when they were interviewed by investigators, they were so open and they didn't try to coordinate their stories, and they had photos to show what they'd done that day. Same thing when I talked to them. In fact, I saw one of the motorcycles that they rode. It was stored under a tarp, and I took a look at it. There's no way you could ride on that as a passenger. There are no passenger seat. There's no foot pegs for a passenger. But when the Bermans' bodies are eventually found, they're found miles from camp, much farther than they reasonably would have gone on a day hike. And also, it was known that Louise had a sore ankle, middle-aged woman with a sore ankle. She wasn't going to take some huge, ambitious hike. And in fact, they had left their cameras behind, which indicated that they hadn't probably planned to be gone for very long. So the supposition of law enforcement was they must have gotten into a vehicle. Probably it was this Mike's truck. And then he comes back late in the day all covered with dirt and he's all charged up and wants to have sex. Maybe something happened here that was sexual in nature. Maybe he made a proposition, or maybe he saw an opportunity and he had always wanted to kill somebody for sexual pleasure. But the theory was that he went off the rails and that he was somehow responsible.
You nailed it right on the head there. I mean, it not only that, but it seems like he, not only did you put two and two together, it seems like everybody at the scene of the campsite put two and two together and knew that this guy wasn't quite, for lack of a better term, wasn't quite all there. And they kind of got the stranger danger feel from him too. And he stuck in their minds, because when investigators kind of went back and took a look at the scene and had interviewed everybody who was there, they all remember him, and they all got the weird vibe from him, and they all remember different things just as you described about him. And it wasn't hard to go back and trace steps about him. Tell people how it was that investigators eventually tracked down Mike.
Well, investigators were able to track down the motorcycle riders pretty quickly. And again, they came across as just rambunctious guys, open book kind of guys. And that's how they came across years later when I tracked them down and interviewed them. They sent me their photos, just the original photos, told me, send them back when you're done with them. I mean, these guys are just open book, everything. Yeah, I could interview them individually, and they weren't nervous. They hadn't coordinated their stories. Everything checked out with them. Mm-hmm. With Mike, investigators had a heck of a time trying to locate him. And it was strange because they thought, well, hadn't he heard about it? Why wouldn't he reach out? There was one deputy in particular, Leon Boyer, he wasn't formally assigned to the case as an investigator, but in the Inyo County Sheriff's Office in the little town of Independence, California, he was the one who first fielded the missing person call. And he always felt close to the case. And after there was this massive search and rescue effort, not only by Inyo County's search and rescue team, but with aerial assets from the California Highway Patrol, the Stockton National Guard, China Lake Naval Weapons Center, and ground teams from surrounding counties. It was like a war zone out there. Went on for 2 weeks, and then Jules Berman flies up there in a plane, and eventually he, with the help from friends and family, organizes a private search effort, and nothing turns up. So law enforcement's thinking there's got to be foul play here. I mean, 2 people just to vanish in a desert wilderness where, yes, it's rugged, but you can see things from the air, and they scoured the area. So this deputy, Leon Boyer, who had originally fielded the call, he just couldn't bear the idea that this Mike guy could just disappear like this. And he had a few clues, but they had a psychological profile that indicated that the perpetrator would likely revisit the scene and probably had been there before. So he started going out, he being Leon Boyer, a deputy, starts taking camping trips into Saline Valley with his teenage son, Jay, and just talking to people. And he's a remarkable guy because by interviewing folks, he's able to come up with a composite drawing. And when he finally does identify Pepe, the drawing is like a spitting image of the guy. It was amazing work. Anyway, he's showing the drawing to people, and people are saying, oh, yeah, I remember that guy. And it was clear that he had come back and visited the valley again a couple of months after the Bermans disappeared. And he had also signed his name to a petition. Stepping back for a second, you mentioned right at the beginning that I was involved in conservation work, wilderness protection work out there. It just so happened that at that time, there was a years-long effort to enhance the wilderness protection for Saline Valley and other areas of the California desert. In fact, that eventually led to Saline Valley being incorporated into Death Valley National Park. I was very involved in that movement. I co-founded an environmental group and spent a lot of time. In fact, that's what eventually motivated me to go to law school. Anyway, this petition was put up because most people who visited the hot springs didn't like the idea of enhanced protection. They thought that this amazing kind of anarchy, counterculture scene would end up being quashed and regulated, and that the oasis as they knew it would vanish. And so most people were reflexively against enhanced protection, and people would sign this petition that was posted at the hot springs. Well, Deputy Boyer found the name of somebody named Mike Pepe, who was in the military. His address corresponded with a logistics base in Barstow, California. And when they pulled up back at the headquarters, when they pulled up his driver's license, they saw that the photo was a spitting image of the composite drawing. So investigators think about it and they decide, we're going to spring an interview on this guy. We're not going to warn him that we're coming. We're going to go out there to the base and see what he has to say. Now, listen, they thought that he was a likely suspect, but I have to tell you, at that point, 10 months after the Bermans vanished, they didn't even have bodies yet. They didn't know if this was a homicide. If, it could have been that the Bermans somehow decided to run off and disappear to some remote part of the world. I mean, there were all kinds of theories. Sure. People in Saline Valley, there were some who thought it was a UFO abduction.
Which was crazy. That's the craziest theory that was out there. But go ahead, I'm sorry.
That's one of them. Yeah. Well, so the law enforcement, 2 investigators, they go to the military base. Now, they had done some advance work with NIS, which later became NCIS. It's the Naval Investigation Service, which also handles crimes by and criminal investigations involving U.S. Marines. Mm-hmm. They go out to this logistics base, these 2 investigators from the Inyo County Sheriff's Office. They set up in a conference room with a tape recorder. Well, it turns out that Pepe is an officer, he's a captain, and he is the adjunct, he is the aide de camp to the commanding general. So they're there in the general's suite of offices, set up in a conference room, and the general, who didn't even know the investigators were coming, but who was cooperating, of course, he tells his aide de camp, hey, there's some people here that want to talk to you. And Pepe walks in, they click on the recorder, and they start to ask him questions. Now, listen, they identified themselves clearly as law enforcement, and he could have lawyered up, but he decided to cooperate with the investigation and to answer questions. Now, talking strictly as a lawyer, not as a journalist, he should have shut his mouth, because his answers to the questions are all over the board. It's only been 10 months since he was out there on this particular trip in January 1986. He can't remember whether he was out there alone or with somebody else. Did he camp at one campground or did he camp at a different campground? And they ask him what he did. They finally get him pinned down. Yes. Well, first he says that he went to the desert sometime a little earlier. It was the end of 1985. But then he realizes, oh, no, they must know the dates, because, of course, the dates that he took leave or something that the military has. And so you can just tell the gears are turning in this guy's mind. So then he goes, yes, it was after New Year's. So they've got him at the scene in the right time frame. So they start asking him about what he did while he was there, and particularly on the day that the Bermans disappeared. And his first answer is, well, I sat in camp all day and read a book. And then they start testing that with other information that they have. And then he says, oh, that's the day that I took a 9-mile hike. And then his story keeps shifting. And then he says, well, maybe I drove my truck up to see this cabin. He never could be pinned down. He had all these different stories. He was evasive. And what was interesting, Tim, is that he wasn't that way in all the lead-up questions. He had a great memory, eye to detail, and he would talk freely about other trips that he'd been on, things he'd seen. He obviously knew his way around Saline Valley, had very detailed information, yet on the day in question, he was all over the board. And after that interview was over, the investigators looked at each other and thought, this is our guy. Yeah. But they didn't even have bodies. They had no hard evidence at that point.
And you put it also in the book quite well that his boss even, well, he had at that point, had he had a new boss? His old boss was fine with him. His new boss wasn't really enamored with him, and I think he was kind of a little eager to get rid of him anyways. But then when you have NIS coming in and interviewing him along with the authorities, well, now this is kind of his putting his head on the chopping block, so to speak, because it's not enthralling him with his boss any more than he already is. It's kind of bad news for Mike Pepe at that point, isn't it?
Well, it's hard to say whether that move back to Quantico had been pre-planned or whether it was something that was spurred by the investigation, or maybe a combination of both. Now, the commanding general secretary told me that once the investigators came in, that the general wanted him out of there. But it could be that it was already pre-scheduled. Now listen, Pepe's never been, he's alive. He's never been charged. He's never been arrested in this case. He is in prison on different charges, as you know, but he's never been arrested in this case. Yet everyone who's looked at the case feels strongly that he is the likely suspect. When I came into it, Tim, I had a completely open mind. I've got no dog in this hunt. Sure. In fact, it would make a great book if I could come in and say, you know what, these guys jumped to a conclusion. The evidence actually points in a different direction. But here's the thing. At that hot springs, when he was there weren't very many people around. And access in there is very, very difficult. So it's not like you've got 20 other guys who might have committed the crime. You can start to go down the list, and it just, the circumstantial evidence just points his direction. And then the fact that his answers were all over the board like that is just a hallmark of somebody who's not telling the truth. People think they can tell when somebody's lying because maybe they get like nervous, or they're hand wringing, or they act shifty. But actually, people sometimes just get nervous, especially if they're being asked hard questions. And it's less about physical reactions or eyes shifting and more about the quality of the answers. When you have someone who has been speaking very clearly and in great detail and has a good memory about things that have no implication, they're safe subjects. But then you get into the day in question, and all of a sudden there's, oh, I was here, oh, I was there, and everything turns vague, and I'm not sure. That's because it's very hard to lie, especially when people are staring at you. So people tend to go vague. They claim lack of recall. They try to divert onto other subjects, and they just want to get away from this because they haven't thought it through that well, and it's just a very uncomfortable place to be. And that was the kind of behavior that Michael Pepe exhibited in the interview. And everyone who had contact with him in that regard, from the commanding general, his secretary, investigators, everyone felt this was the guy. But everyone who touched the case thinking this was the guy isn't enough for a criminal conviction.
Interestingly enough, too, you also cited his sister, mentioned that he tightens up when he gets in a jam. When he starts to lie, he tightens up. His story wavers a little bit. He did the exact same thing with investigators. When they got him in a jam, he tightened up. His story wavered. He did exactly as his sister said he would. And he continued to do so when he started to lie.
Well, I interviewed his father briefly. His father stuck up for the son and said, oh, I think he was just the closest guy around, and so they blamed it on him. Two of his sisters felt that it was within the bounds of his character that he might have committed, a crime of this nature. And they actually granted me interviews and were very critical of their brother's behavior, particularly, as you know, because later incidents really pull back the veil and reveal who Michael Pepe is as a person.
We can get into that a little bit here, and let's state here, and in this time period that we're talking about, where he's confronted while he's in the service, he's also having an affair. He's married. He's having an affair, and as he gets divorced, after he gets divorced from his current wife, he ends up having girlfriends that talk about these different sexual proclivities that he has, and that he's got some, shall we just say, some unusual sexual habits. Is that a good way to put it?
He does. And he married a Russian woman, brought her over, much younger woman after he got out of the Marine Corps, brought her to the United States on a fiancé visa. And she fled the marriage because, from what I was told by his sisters, he hurt her. He hurt her in bed, and she couldn't take it. And yes, he had difficulties in relationships with women. Now, people sometimes get married and divorced. He had several wives and girlfriends. He was having an affair. That doesn't make a person a murderer, right. But it does show that perhaps sex and sexuality churn in him in a way that makes him a more troubled individual in some ways. But nothing, despite all of that, nothing there to me flagged him as a potential suspect the way that his behavior did once he got out of the Marine Corps. The Russian woman left him, and he decides to take a trip to Asia and ends up in Cambodia, which has a reputation as being kind of a wild west of Asia. Long backstory there about politics and the terrible scourge of the Pol Pot regime and the millions of people who were killed. But the net effect of it was you had a dysfunctional society with a corrupt judicial system, and little girls were seen as fair game for deviance. And so Cambodia in the early 2000s was a magnet for pedophiles and sexual deviants of all kinds. Well, Michael Pepe goes over there, and he's a rather, he's a somebody in that world. He's a Marine Corps officer. He has a pension, what by Cambodia standards makes him a wealthy man. He starts teaching as a professor at a local school. He is greeted by the king of Cambodia. He becomes friends with the former prime minister of Cambodia. I mean, he's operating at a high level. So what does he do with this villa that he has, with this connections that he has, the power, the privilege, the money? He brings in little girls by making deals with their families. He purchases little girls as sex slaves. And when I say little, I mean physically little and young in age. One of the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations that was involved in eventually rescuing the girls, Don Brewster, a pastor from California, explained to me, Doug, these girls were 9 to 12 years old, and that's shocking enough as it is. But he said, you need to understand, the little Cambodian and ethnic Vietnamese girls, they're the size of a 5-year-old here. These were tiny children. He was tying them up, raping them, abusing them, gagging them, leaving them bloody. I mean, this was torture. And that's what he was doing. So a man of means who can do anything he wants. And, I joked how Barry had all these means and, maybe if it were me, I would be running off the rails and, and kind of wallowing in the wealth. Barry,
but not like that though.
But Michael Pepe, his big fantasy is to have this sexual sadism. And you think, well, if he's doing this in midlife, right?
Right.
Did this just bubble up suddenly, or is this something that's been with him? Does this give us a window back in time into what might have taken place with Barry and Louise Berman in Saline Valley?
One of the things, well, I don't know that I want to spoil it for the book. There's a thing with a handcuff key that's found.
There is. When the Berman's grave, let's talk about the Berman's grave for a second.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. About almost 3 years after the Bermans vanish in Saline Valley, a hiker who's coming down through a very remote part of Saline Valley. I'd been through there before, but it's not the kind of place where you go hang out. It's a portion of the valley that rises up from where the hot springs are, and you go over a pass and down a very rugged canyon. I'm talking miles and miles, and you eventually end up in another desert valley, which itself is very, very remote. And it's about 7 miles and several thousand vertical feet above the campsite where the Bermans were, which is a significant hike in desert wilderness, way beyond what Louise would have been capable of, especially if they were planning to go back to camp, right, and do it as a round trip. Mm-hmm. That's where a hiker who's passing through this very rugged area spots something shining, and it turns out to be a human skull. Well, when investigators go in, they discover the remains of the Bermans. They have been very meticulously secreted in the edge of a dry riverbed where there's what's called a cut bank, where water intermittently flowing over hundreds or thousands of years has carved a little trough. And whoever concealed the Bermans, presumably Pepe, but again, it's never been proven, but somebody with the strength, the stamina, the good enough planning, carefully removed their clothing, removed items of jewelry, stacked them in this narrow trough, and then meticulously covered them with dirt and rocks so it would blend in with the surroundings. But over time, as more water comes and rain falls, things had washed away a little bit, and it appeared animals had gotten in there because the bones were scattered over a fairly wide area. But the core of the remains were still entombed in this cut bank grave. And when investigators unearth the remains, they discover, along with the bodies, the underwear, and they discover a handcuff key, which itself is suggestive, right? Because one of the things that Michael Pepe did later, when he was abusing and torturing little girls in Cambodia, is invariably he would tie them up. He loved the idea of having full control. He wanted to control and then abuse. Somehow that was his fantasy. Can you imagine? I mean, what a dark character. This is a man of some substance, a man of education, a Marine Corps officer steeped in the values of honor and pride and the things that the Marine Corps stands for. And he's a Catholic by upbringing. And he turns all that into that kind of sadism.
Yeah.
That sounds like the kind of person who might have committed sexual related murders in Saline Valley in January 1986. That's what investigators concluded. And I get it.
A repressed personality who needs to exercise that in a deviant way. And that's how he gets his kicks. And he kept doing it over and over and over again and felt and got his thrill by getting away with it, or supposedly getting away with it. I tell you, Doug, this book is fascinating. It's stomach turning in that when you read these cases again, and you read, especially the stuff from Cambodia, it absolutely turns your stomach. But to think that a human being could do that to another human being, some of the things that Pepe did over and over and over again, especially to someone that young, is just mind-blowingly disgusting.
It is, Tim, but what's remarkable is the resilience of these little girls.
Yeah.
And that was one of the wonderful parts of working on this story, was over time to see what happened. They were rescued by charitable organizations, non-governmental organizations, eventually ended up in the United States, adopted by American families, sent to school, and matured into these dignified, well-spoken, well-educated young women. It was just stunning to see the transformation in these girls who became these dignified young women. And so eventually they, with a lot of help and character of themselves, they emerge from this trial by fire, forged into young women who I think are going to make a real mark in the world. In fact, several of them have determined that they're going to help other victims of abuse. They feel that's their calling, and they're going to devote their lives to that. So there is in a sense an uplifting and a positive aspect to that sort of resilience. But the depths of Michael Pepe's behavior are so bad that even when he's sent to prison on federal charges arising from what he did in Cambodia, within the culture of the prison system, the federal prison system, people like him are the lowest of the low. And when his cellmate and other prisoners find out that he's actually engaged in this horrific kind of behavior, they reach out, and two of them reached out to law enforcement, but first reached out to me in response to an LA Weekly cover story that I wrote about the case, and said he's bragged about these killings. He's talked about it as a way of elevating himself in the prison culture as not just some deviant, but a bona fide murderer. It's a higher social standing, as it were. It's a crime that's more acceptable in jailhouse culture. And they come forward offering details about the homicides that were not in my article, and it had not been made public. Yet they knew some of these details. And the question is, did they just get creative? and happened to hit on these details by luck? Or had Pepe indeed, in an effort to ingratiate himself with people who could watch out for him and befriend him, and had he bragged about the killings the way that they say he did? And I spoke to them on the phone, never met them in person, but an Inyo County Sheriff's investigator talked to them and reported afterwards that they were serious people who had believable reasons for talking. So that became yet another element in the case that ultimately led the Inyo County Sheriff's Office to, I wouldn't say reopen the case, because a murder investigation is never closed until it's solved, but to revive the case and dust off the files. And they assigned an investigator who spent 2 years on the case from 2015 to 2017, but just couldn't get it to the point where the DA's office felt that they had enough to file. Sheriff's office thought they had enough to arrest and charge, but the DA's office felt differently. And that's where things sit today.
Well, let's face it here, Doug. In jail culture, a chomo gets shanked or gets turned. One or the other. It gets turned on. And I'm using jail terms here, but
you are.
But if Pepe feels like he can brag about murders, well, then he thinks all of a sudden he's got standing, right? And of course he's gonna brag about murders when he gets in there, because he doesn't want to be labeled a chomo and he doesn't want to get shanked in the shower. That's what it comes down to. And he knows the minute that he gets labeled, he's dead. And that's all it comes down to. Because although he did go, as you pointed out in the book, he's in a facility with other chomos. So, he's a little more insulated. Is that a good way of putting it? He's insulated and he's with others. So in that respect, the chances that he's going to get shanked are probably less, but still he's one of the worst of the worst. So,
well, that's true. And the federal prison south of Tucson, the federal maximum security prison south of Tucson, Arizona, which is where he ends up, is a place where they concentrate people who are child molesters and other sexual deviants, to try to offer them counseling and also safety in numbers, that kind of thing. But nonetheless, Tim, listen, if you're stuck in a prison for a long period of time, it's not just about will you get shanked. Although, as you pointed out, if you're a convicted child molester, even in a so-called safe institution, you may end up being attacked. But it's also just a matter of the day-to-day life, the day-to-day living. Are you going to be bumped against? Are you going to be put down on? Are you going to constantly be having to watch your back? Are you going to be spurned and shamed and with everybody looking at you, and you never know where you stand? Imagine the stress of all that. Oh, yeah. Whereas if you can get yourself in with a group who will protect you and befriend you, you have somebody to talk to, somebody to watch your back, you can sleep at night. And so just pure survival might indicate that you pull anything out of the hopper that might connect with these guys. And so if you're in a situation like that, and in fact, if you have committed murder, it's plausible that you would talk about that as a way of saying, hey, I'm a serious person here. I'm not some miserable little child molester. I'm a fearsome guy. And that kind of fearsomeness is something that would garner respect in prison. So I'm sure Pepe, if he would talk, would deny all of this, but he hasn't talked. I've given him, his lawyers, multiple opportunities, tried to get them to comment, but they just won't do it. And I understand. I mean, as a lawyer, there's no way I would let Michael Pepe talk to a journalist.
Right. Exactly. I tell you what, folks, we'll leave Michael Pepe's fate to the book and to Doug's blog, which is amazing, by the way. If you go to his website, which we have a link in the description of this program, we want you to keep following up with Doug as to Michael Pepe's fate, because it is quite interesting. We'll leave it at that. We'll just put it this way. Michael Pepe believes Michael Pepe should be a free bird. He should be out there mingling amongst society, and he believes he's as innocent as can be, which is probably as far from the truth as you can get. And I don't make my opinions known very often on this program, but to say he's an innocent man, I think is stretching the truth quite a bit. But follow up on Doug's blog, Doug Kari, Kari.com. We'll have a link in the description of this program. The book is The Berman Murders, Unraveling the Mojave Desert's Most Mysterious Unsolved Crime. Fascinating book, Doug. Absolutely fascinating. As comprehensive a book on this case as you can get. You really have outdone yourself, my friend. It is an enjoyable book. It is an amazing book, and I encourage everyone to go out and get it. I want to thank you so much for being on the program today.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be on your program, and I'm honored and appreciative.
Thank you so much, Doug. Folks, we're going to lighten things up a little bit. It's time now for us to change gears. It's time now for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals.
It's Crayon News story time.
What happened with this dude, Christ Bearer? I heard he cut his penis off and then jumped off a balcony.
Suspect pulls gun from butt, shoots twice at Denver police.
What is your emergency?
I need help.
And what's the problem?
I'm too high.
You're too high?
Yeah.
It's that time. The time you've all been looking forward to. It's time for Dumb Crimes and Stupid Criminals. And with that, we bring in a co-hostess. The co-hostess with the mostest, Ms. Mally Fox. Mally, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. Well, okay, I'm lying. It's cold here. It is frigid here. It's been such a nice winter. And then all of a sudden, it is now winter again.
I know we had snow flurries today.
Did you?
Yeah.
All I know
it was
is,
a nice weekend, and now it's freaking cold, cloudy, and there's flurries.
Right. All I know is the chipmunks are complaining they're freezing their nuts off. There you go. Yeah, they're not happy. They just aren't. I think they're regretting waking up early. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's chilly out there. I have this to say about today's Dumb Crime, Stupid Criminals, Mal. You people are sick. That's all there is to it. I thought I was perverted.
Yeah.
Wow.
Someone has you beat?
All of the audience is sending in sick, perverted stories. I mean, I like a good perverted story every once in a while, but let's mix it up. Mm-hmm. I think this entire episode is like not safe for work except for two stories. I mean,
so do we do the two safe stories and then we're like, all right.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's do the two safe stories, and then it's all meaty meat stories. Mel,
meaty meat. Mighty meat.
Yeah, mighty meat is what it is. Let's do the first two, shall we?
Yes.
Yeah, and then it's all what should we call it?
After hours.
Yes, it's all turn the kids away from the listening device and Katie bar the door is what it is. Let's start out in California. A California mom is the alleged ringleader behind an $8 million theft ring that has hit over 200 Ulta stores. Do you shop at Ulta by chance?
I do. That and Sephora.
That and Sephora, okay.
Uh-huh.
53-year-old Michelle Mack is accused of running the crime ring, reportedly called California Girls. Interesting. Mm-hmm. And of course, it's a Fox News story that I don't have access to. See, they did it to me again.
You know what? That's been going on a lot, though, where they're hitting up these stores because of security and stuff, where employees are told don't even mess with them. Just let them take everything. They just come in, a group of them, and just scoop everything up in bags and leave.
Yeah, let me see here. Oh, Michelle Mack ran the sprawling enterprise from her home in the San Diego foothills, according to authorities. The quote is, "This is a multi-million-dollar criminal scheme. It was complex. It was orchestrated," according to a press release from February announcing the charges. We are not talking about garden variety shoplifting. The California mom is accused of orchestrating a nationwide shoplifting scheme that stole millions of dollars worth of makeup and clothing from hundreds of stores for more than a decade, according to the California Department of Justice. According to a complaint filed by California Attorney General Rob Bonta, more than $300,000 worth of makeup and other products were found in 53-year-old Michelle Mack and Kenneth Mack's shared Bonsall home when a search warrant was served on December 6th of 2023. Mack allegedly paid for airfare, hotels, and car rental costs for up to a dozen women who would go out and steal goods before sending them to Mack's home. Mack would allegedly sell the stolen goods at a discount on her Amazon Marketplace storefront.
Oh. I heard Amazon's getting stricter with that, though, on what you can sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, why?
You know, the other place is Facebook. Facebook Marketplace also is having the same issue. Her group, which investigators have called the California Girls, operated in more than a dozen states around the country, targeting outlets including LensCrafters, Sephora, another one of your favorite shops, Mal, and at least 231 Ulta stores, that according to NBC San Diego. Police uncovered what they described as a mini store filled with beauty products, sunglasses, and designer bags inside Mack's garage. They also located hundreds of postmarked envelopes that were stuffed with stolen products ready to be sent out to customers. Bonta filed 140 felony charges against Mack, her husband Kenneth, and 7 other alleged members of the crime ring. The charges include conspiracy to commit organized retail theft, grand theft, and receipt of stolen property. All defendants have pleaded not guilty. So there you go.
Wow.
By the way, Bonta says that the current losses are calculated at $8 million.
Wow.
That's a lot of cash out the door from all these different stores.
Wow.
That's a lot. A lot. So I don't know that qualifies as being a dumb criminal. That's a pretty smart criminal.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A little bling ring.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's catchy, Mel. Bling ring.
Well, except though I think there's a group that was known as the bling ring. They used to go steal from actors and musicians and stuff their homes. I think they were called the bling ring.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of teenagers.
Oh, there you go. This one would be a meth ring. This is the second safe story we have, and then we're off and running with our not safe for work stories today. 2 tons of meth was found during a drug investigation in Riverside County in California. Riverside County Sheriff's Department investigators and federal agents this week seized 2 tons of methamphetamine following a drug investigation of Riverside and Los Angeles counties. Sheriff's investigators, with assistance from the Homeland Security Investigations and West Covina Police Department, made the discovery Wednesday in an unincorporated area of Riverside County and West Covina after an investigation into the sale and transportation of methamphetamine, according to a department statement. The investigation, the statement read in part, led to the seizure of 4,038 pounds of methamphetamine.
Oh, my goodness.
That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Think of that. A photo of the drugs seized showed clear Ziploc bags and pink bags filled with drugs on the ground and stacked on cardboard boxes. I'm about to show you the picture of this, Mally. That's what 4,038 pounds of methamphetamine looks like.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. That's I can't quite describe it to you what that looks like, but let's just say it's a lot of drugs. The seizure was not the largest, however. In Houston, Homeland Security investigations once seized 6.5 tons of methamphetamine that smugglers tried to bring to the Eagle Pass port. The agency said the amount of meth discovered was the largest ever encountered by law enforcement in a single trafficking attempt at a port of entry, and that was valued at more than $117 million.
Jeez, I'm in the wrong business.
Right?
We're breaking. We should do Breaking Bad like part 2.
Right. I think podcasting is not where it's at.
Yeah.
It's in meth sales. By the way, there's a lot of toothless people moving around. If There's that much meth moving around the country. Further details of the Riverside County investigation and drug bust were not provided. A spokesman for the sheriff's department did not immediately respond to a request for comment, probably because he was busy trying to smoke away that 4,038 pounds of meth.
Holy crap.
That's a lot of meth. All right, it's time to put the kids to bed. It's time to put your boss to bed. If you're listening to this at work, it is time now for the Not Safe for Work version of this show, and it's going deep, folks. When I say it's going deep, I mean in the Not Safe for Work version of going deep, because, boy, you people are sick. That's all I got to say. Mally, we've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stories this week.
Oh, my.
That are not safe for work. Kid you not. Let's start it off with 5 Florida circuit judges defending a pervert lawyer in a weird cover-up. That's right, kids. This is a kind of a weird article. It's written in the first person by this journalist. So I'm gonna cut to the chase in this deal. So essentially, of course, yes, we're going to Florida, as I mentioned. There's a legal drama in Levy County, Florida, that just got weirder. On one side, what the Hales content creator Jeremy Hales is saying is that he's up against the belligerent 8th Judicial Circuit of Florida Judge Craig DeThomasis, whose favorite pastime is yelling at the defendant and his lawyers for hours without hearing any evidence while coddling the plaintiff. This is according to the journalist who wrote this.
Okay.
In what should have been a 1-hour hearing, DeThomasis turned a simple protection order case into a First Amendment battle of the ages that might end up in the Supreme Court of Florida. Now, this journalist reported that the judge with a grudge, that's what he calls him, refuses to recuse himself for the 3rd time, even after showing wild and obvious bias against the defendant. But now there's new information about DeThomasis and the 8th Judicial Circuit that should make everyone sit up and take notice. And it goes all the way to Governor Ron DeSantis' office. Something is very wrong in Levy and Alachua counties. In 2014, William Ezell was one of the brightest prosecuting attorneys in town. He was well liked even by defense attorneys. In fact, DeThomasis, who was a defense attorney at the time, reported that Ezell would share strategy with him before trial, an odd thing to do according to the opinion of lawyers that this author knows. DeThomasis called him a very valuable asset in the prosecutor's office. But Ezell had a dark secret that should have destroyed his career as a lawyer forever. In September of 2014, Ezell went into Tan USA in Gainesville and filmed a half-naked woman over the wall of his tanning booth. That's a huge no-no, by the way. His psychologist would later tell a Florida Supreme Court judge who oversaw his bar hearing, that he was overcome with anxiety because his wife didn't let him go to tanning salons because she was a dermatologist. That anxiety made Ezell take out his phone, climb up on something, and film the undressed woman in the booth next to him.
Ah, creep.
Yep. Those of you who suffer from panic attacks and anxiety may find this explanation puzzling if you have been using breathing techniques, meditation, or medication to calm your anxiety. Who knew that voyeurism could relieve that anxiety? Is what the author goes on to say. For a visual telling of this story, he says, I've helpfully created a Lego experience that will help to illustrate what happened here. You've heard of gonzo journalism, but I may be the first to have invented Lego journalism. I think he's joking there. Although he does have a Lego setup showing the exact setup of what he's trying to explain. No less than 5 judges from the 8th Circuit, most of whom are still on the bench, and a bunch of prosecutors and victims advocates swallowed that story and vociferously advocated for Ezell to be reinstated to the bar following a measly 90-day suspension. The most shocking defense of Ezell's behavior came from Judge David Kreider, Chief Assistant State Attorney Gene Singer, and State Attorney William Cervone, who all said that the creeping, peeping Tom incident occurred in his private time and shouldn't have any effect on his professional life.
Okay, so they're either good old boys or he's got something on those judges, because there's no way that 5 judges should let him back on the.
That's right. That's right.
Be part of the bar.
That's right. He also goes on to say here, who knew that if you were a prosecutor, you could commit crimes against women in your personal time and get away with it? He says if committing a crime against a vulnerable woman in a tanning booth isn't a black eye on the profession, and to Thomas's opinion, I'd hate to hear what would be. So there you go. That's creepy story number 1 in this not safe for work deal. This next one is a 2-parter, Mel.
Okay.
Now, what would be the oddest name you could think of changing your name to if you had to?
Oh my God, can I tell you what this one kid who used to make fun of me in high school used to call me?
Sure.
Melissa the Molester.
There you go. Okay, now
but you know what his name was?
What's that?
Haw.
What was his name?
Haw.
Haw?
Yep.
As in ha-ha?
H-A. Right, H-A, and he's the one that was calling me that name. He was so mean to me.
As in like the Green Bay Packers ha-ha Clinton Dix?
I guess, yeah. No, his first name was Ha.
Huh. And he
was
wanted
in my
to...
gym class, and he called me Melissa the Molester.
Really? And he had room to talk. Sounds like this kid probably was friends with this guy over in Green Bay. This guy changed his name. This guy had a perfectly good name. Changed his name, Mally, to D's Nuts.
That's what my bonus son says. He's always like, D's Nuts. Whenever you ask him a question, that's his response.
Which is a Snoop Dogg thing. I think we've all heard the album, right? Where, he says, what's his name's trying to get at you? And they say, who? And he goes, D's Nuts, right?
Yeah.
So this man named D's Nuts is arrested in Green Bay and charged with battery. So when the cops go, what's your name? And he goes, D's Nuts. Which is pretty funny, right? A man in Green Bay was with a one-of-a-kind first name was taken into custody after an alleged disturbance on the city's east side. I have to ask my uncle about this guy. According to a criminal complaint obtained by Local 5, 42-year-old D's Nuts Kroll, that's his name, was arrested following an incident involving a gun. On March 5th, around 10 p.m., officers were sent to the 900 block of East Walnut Street. Yes, D's Nuts lives somewhere near
Walnut.
East Walnut Street for a reported disturbance. When officers got to the scene, 2 people were brought to a squad car and placed in the back. Additionally, officers took Kroll into custody, and he was reportedly standing outside with no shirt on. The complaint says that Kroll appeared to be highly intoxicated, but he did follow officers' commands. It is always mentioned that authorities identified Kroll by his Wisconsin ID card, which said D's Nuts Lee Kroll. It's his full name. Mm. The 2 people who were originally brought to a squad car said they were arguing with Kroll over the phone around 8 p.m. About 2 hours later, around 10 p.m., they found the door to the residence was locked. One person said that Kroll opened the door and punched them with a closed fist in the shoulder. This led to a physical altercation. At one point, Kroll allegedly got a gun, which is a little extreme. Mm-hmm. Authorities later took that gun into evidence and found it was a CO2 BB gun. It was reportedly loaded and had 8 silver 4.5 millimeter BBs. When authorities interviewed Kroll, they claimed it was apparent he was talking in circles at the time. Throughout the official complaint, Kroll was referred to as D's Nuts. Kroll was charged with battery misdemeanor upon 9 months in prison. Disorderly conduct, use of a dangerous weapon, which is a misdemeanor, and up to 90 days in prison, which can be increased to up to 6 months due to having a dangerous weapon. Court records show that Kroll had his initial appearance back on March 6th at 2 p.m. A signature bond was set at $1,000 for Kroll. He will be back at the Brown County Courthouse on April 24th for a status conference. It's unknown whether the judge referred to him as D's nuts at the time as well. Now, an interesting origin story to D's nuts, if you will, Mally, which is the second part of our story. Would you like to know how D's nuts got his name?
Yes, please. I'm quite curious.
It's not the candy bar or the Dr. Dre song, but the Wisconsin man whose legal first name is a favorite euphemism when making testicle or other jokes. In April of 2011, shortly before his 30th birthday, Derek Lee Kroll, which was his God-given name, decided it was time for a change. A name change, that is. So the Green Bay resident filled out by hand a 2-page petition for a name change form, had the document notarized, and submitted it along with a $164.50 filing fee to the local circuit court, along with his address and date of birth. Kroll listed himself as disabled and affirmed that he was not a sex offender. As for why he wanted to change his name, Kroll provided a brief explanation. Here's what it said, Mally. I, without a doubt, hate my name, and he wrote it in capital letters.
So he hated the name Derek, but he wants to have D's nuts.
Yes, D's nuts, Lee Kroll.
I wonder what does he have a personalized license plate?
That's a very good question. Let's read on and find out. In place of Derek, Kroll wanted to legally be known as D's Nuts Lee Kroll. Within 2 months of his court application, Kroll appeared before Judge Timothy Hinkfuss, an interesting name nonetheless, who granted the petition. In short order, Kroll amended his driver's license to reflect his new name. Kroll kept the D's Nuts handle until September of 2017, when he once again filed a circuit court petition. This time, he asked the court to approve a change in his first name from Des Nuts. Oh, it's Des Nuts at first.
Oh, okay.
D-E-Z to D's with 2 E's to D's Nuts.
Well, probably because everyone's like, what's Des Nuts?
Right. He misspelled it, evidently, because the education level was not where it was supposed to be. So it was Des Nuts, thinking, I get it. Okay, so I read it wrong. It was Des Nuts from 2011 to 2017. And then he realized people were calling him Des.
Right.
So he's like, no, it's D's. How come you people can't spell D's? And he's like, oh, dummy. I'm the dummy here.
Mm-hmm.
So he put an extra E in there for D's Nuts and sought to have the switch memorialized on his birth certificate. As for the reason to again change his name, Kroll wrote, it was not spelled right. So it went from Des to D's. This was a reference to his 2011 Des Nuts application. It is unclear why Kroll let more than 6 years pass before correcting this purported error. From Des.
I wonder if he did a GoFundMe to raise the money to change his name.
Well, it is $164.50, Mally. That's
a lot of money to some people.
That's big time money in Green Bay. I'm just saying. Judge Tammy Jo Hawk granted the Des to D's transformation, probably because she, wanted that full transformation to happen. The name D's Nuts has subsequently appeared on Kroll's 2023 divorce filings.
Well, I wonder why she divorced him.
Imagine, will you? Why would you ever let D's Nuts go? You know what I mean? As well as the deed to his Walnut Street residence. Oh, so he lost a house too. Mm. Oh, somebody let D's Nuts go. Now 42, imagine that. He is also listed as the defendant in a criminal complaint charging him with battery and disorderly conduct. We just read about it. So imagine that he's now got a criminal record.
So when the cops asked what happened, I got hit by D's Nuts?
Yes. Upside the face, if you will.
Yeah. I was smacked by D's Nuts?
Yep, upside the face. Right on the chin. Yeah. Yeah. D's Nuts. By the way, would you like to see what D's Nuts look like? There they are.
Oh boy, he looks like Jesus.
He kind of does.
They're
Yeah.
like, huh?
So they'd be holy nuts. Yeah. So there's these nuts, Mally. That's the first time I believe I've showed you these nuts. There you go. We'll move on here. Again, all these stories not safe for work because you people have surprised me this week. So there you go. This next one, Mally, here you go. If you thought it was just all men this week, Mal, no, I'm about to surprise you.
Okay.
There you go. This lovely young lady right here.
I just read what the heading was.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, she looks nice.
Yeah.
And then I read the heading. I'm like, ow.
She's a mousy young lady. She was arrested for allegedly doing naked jumping jacks in her front yard. I want to thank our listeners for sending this one along. We go to Horry County, South Carolina.
Horry County?
Yes, Horry County. Oh, apropos. A woman was arrested after allegedly doing jumping jacks naked in her front yard. Well, we all need physical fitness in our life. Mm-hmm. I mean, come on.
She's just airing out places.
Oh, well, my God, Mally. I was going for the exercise. You were going for hygiene. Yeah. Hello, Gene. 27-year-old Alexis Harnett, according to a neighbor, told police that she saw her in her front yard screaming and doing what appeared to be jumping jacks while topless. Who screams and does jumping jacks?
Well, she had a lot of flapping going on.
Oh, well, it was either painful or she was counting, one or the other. Ow, 3! Ow, 4! Do you think they were that big that they hurt when they bounced?
I was thinking something else was flapping.
Oh, hi-oh.
My mom is going to call me.
Yeah, she is.
With my dad in the background. You tell her.
That was not appropriate. We didn't
Crazy
raise
that
her
way.
You tell her that Tim is a bad influence.
Yep.
We're going to need to talk to him, too. Does that Tim go to church? He should. The neighbor then showed video of the incident to police. Oh, she took video.
Oh. That's how they're not going to believe her otherwise.
No, of course not. I mean, it's strictly for the case. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason she took video. The police report states that there's no fence at the home or anything that would prevent people from seeing into Harnett's yard. That's why the video's there. Because there's no fence. Harnett was arrested on Sunday, charged with 1 count of obscene exposure. She was released from jail after posting $10,000 bond on Tuesday afternoon. During her bond hearing on Sunday, a judge said that if Harnett posted bond, she must be on home detention. Because God knows we don't want her topless at the gym. She also is not allowed to have contact with the victim, who is a man with 2 small children. Why is he complaining?
Stop. You wouldn't be complaining. You'd probably be bringing her lemonade. Here you go. Right. It looks hot out.
Can I towel you off? Harnett is due back in court later this month on an unrelated third-degree assault and battery charge. I'm only imagining what she was battering people with. Mm-hmm. Recently filed documents from prosecutors detail a history of alleged harassment with affidavits provided by multiple neighbors. Harnett and her boyfriend, Worden Butler, the luckiest man on earth, are also accused of, oh my God, no. Okay, I take that back. Now that I'm about to read what she's actually burning a cross while facing their black neighbors in an effort to intimidate them in November.
Oh.
Okay, I take that back. She's not a very nice person.
Right.
Yeah, the couple are facing an effort from the 15th Circuit Solicitor's Office to kick them out of a home on Corbett Drive through a temporary injunction. Now I know why she's on the front lawn screaming and doing jumping jacks.
Right. I just thought she was an exhibitionist. Apparently,
Apparently, no. The pair rent the home from Butler's mother, who filed a request to dismiss the injunction in February. Her filings claim boarding up the home for a year is not a solution, but an overreach of government. They boarded up the home. And they burned a cross. It's a little extreme.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
By the way, here's a picture of both her and the boyfriend. Yeah, that screams racist right there. Yeah.
He kind of looks like the previous guy, D's Nuts.
He does look like D's Nuts, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're related. You never know. All right, we're back to the lewd and lascivious behavior here as we go to Colorado. We just don't keep it to one state here, Mally.
No.
We're
spreading the love.
That's right, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thank you for adding that line, because that's exactly what this guy is doing in Colorado. This man is charged with vile acts at a Safeway market in Colorado. By the way, I'll never shop at a Safeway in Colorado again. An employee pleasured himself on produce and baked goods at a Safeway. That's why.
No fruit is safe.
That's right. Oh, look, a banana! A supermarket employee pleasured himself onto the produce and other unsealed merchandise. Oh, God, it was unsealed. According to Colorado police, who say that videos of the vile activity were found during a recent search of the man's residence, so he taped it.
Oh.
By the way, this guy looks like he has a melon head. There he is.
Yeah, he does. You know who he looks like? He looks like, what's that guy's name? Duggar, the one that got arrested for child porn and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
The oldest son.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. 32-year-old Stephen Masulta was busted last month on charges that he masturbated outside numerous coffee shops and businesses in the Fort Collins area. Good God, what's this guy's problem? At the time of Masulta's arrest, cops executed a search warrant at his home and seized electronic devices containing incriminating video evidence. That cache, which investigators are still reviewing, resulted this week in additional misdemeanor and felony counts being filed against Masulta. Since his February arrest, Masulta has been held in the Larimer County lockup in lieu of $25,000 bond. Not enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
He's scheduled for a March 22nd court appearance on the new counts. The police probe of Masulta has determined that he was employed at a Safeway store in Fort Collins for a brief period ending last month. There's not enough fruit and vegetable cleaner, Mally.
Yeah.
To get that Safeway store clean. Videos recorded by Masulta, police allege, show him masturbating out of fruits, vegetables, and baked goods. All of which...
Baked goods?
Yes.
Man.
Onto cakes, Mally. Delicious
muffins.
Cakes. Muffins. And the little Crispies. You know, the Crispies? You know, the beautiful...
Rice Krispies?
No. You know the big Crispies? You know, the ones with the cinnamon and the sugar, and they're like big round discs?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Oh,
I know what you're talking about.
Those are so good. But he had to add the icing. You know what I mean? It's... Yeah. All of which were not commercially sealed, so they were out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he basically went into the baked goods case and he frosted the case. He frosted the glass, Mally. He did all over. Yeah. He did that all over the supermarket, Mally.
So do you think it was a fetish, or do you think he had like OnlyFans, and so he's getting money off of that?
He had an look at this guy's face. Do you think this guy has an OnlyFans?
They're not looking at the face.
Well, that's true. Yeah, you're right. He probably does.
They're looking at the fruits and vegetables and baked goods getting violated.
Yeah, he probably calls it Baker Bread Staker. I don't know. Probably. God, I hate to think of it. Not only that, but do you think it makes a lot of money? I'm just wondering, because if it does, I think I have a new career.
Just add it to the list of ideas.
Wonder how late Cub Foods is open. That's all I got to say.
Isn't Cubs open 24 hours?
Maybe.
I know some of them are, or at least they used to be.
Yep. Yeah. I'm going to pull an assault on the Hy-Vee later on. Just saying. It says here, videos recorded by Masalta police allege show him masturbating onto fruits, vegetables, and baked goods. Oh, I went over that part already. I'm just planning out my crime here. The clips have allowed detectives to identify alleged victims, some of whom are believed to be minors. As a result, Masalta... Also, people ate it!
Oh my God, that's so gross.
Blah.
I am trying not to have a gag reaction right now.
Blah. As a result... Masalta has been charged with...
That is just nasty.
Masalta has been charged with 16 attempted sexual assaults on a child count. Yeah.
What state is he in so I know I'm okay?
Colorado.
Okay.
Fort Collins area.
Never been to Fort Collins, just the Denver area. We're good.
Yeah. As the probe of Masalta continues, I think he probed a few others, if you know what I mean. By his,
gross. What's sad is that there's probably other people out there like that haven't been caught.
I know.
Dude.
There's some people in Fort Collins that have had a little Masalta's pepper in their throat.
Oh, God. Nasty.
Police anticipate additional charges and more victims to be identified.
Oh, God.
Until recently, Masalta appears to have resided in Sacramento, California. So there's people in Sacramento that have had a little bit of Masalta's sack in them.
I'm trying really hard not to gag. My reaction is I am so trying to think of other things as you're talking because I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the verge of just starting to gag.
Okay, we'll move on. Oh. Speaking of, I need a drink to clear my throat.
Oh my God. It's like my tongue is like curling in the back, like ready to go. What?
Oh. Who does that?
I have no idea.
I'm sure somebody will write us an email and tell us, but who does that?
He needs some professional help.
Yeah.
That's just wrong.
You know what this is going to lead to now, right?
You're going to get a lot of these messages.
Yeah, a lot of these messages.
Going to these stories.
A lot more of these stories. That's right. That's right. They found our trigger, Mally. They found our trigger. Our next story is, of course, a Florida story. We go to a Florida beach where a 60-year-old naked man is arrested for indecent scenarios on a Florida beach.
Does Florida have nude beaches?
They do now. I'm not sure. I don't think they do. But according to Leighton Paul Newman, they do now, or Nauman rather. The 60-year-old sound engineer went to the beach on Saturday afternoon hoping to arrange a sexual encounter or maybe just go home with someone's phone number, that according to court records. By the way, if this guy walked up to you and he was stark naked, would you be giving him your number? No. Doesn't he look like he'd be like, Melly, here's my dingling. Can I get them digits? Doesn't he look like he has that voice? Just saying. While such goals may be commonplace, Nauman's unusual tactics resulted in his arrest at Blind Creek beach, which is what most people were when they saw him naked.
Yeah. My eyes.
Which, by the way, Mally, it is a clothing optional spot in Jensen Beach, Florida. So, yes.
Okay, well then why is he getting arrested? Was he doing something?
Because it was offensive to most people's eyes, Mel. That's why he got arrested.
Yeah, but if it's clothing optional.
I think because he exhibited some lewd behavior while he was in the buff. In response to prior complaints about lewd behavior occurring on beach pathways, a sheriff's deputy was on foot patrol when he came upon a naked Nauman seated in a recliner chair with a hat over his face around 12:30 p.m. An arrest report offers an explicit account of the quote-unquote genital presentation observed by the cop. Maybe he was like the previous story. He had some fruits and vegetables around it. I don't know. The document, with its description of multiple rings with a metal chain and a note advising passerby to please feel free to investigate gently.
Oh, my God.
Was in the affidavit.
All right.
My God. It says we can read a document that it describes it further. Do we need to describe it further?
No, we're good.
Okay, good. While the beach allows nudity, police report that the pathways are accidentally frequented by parents with children as well as other beachgoers, and that Nauman's scenario was unacceptable at a public beach. Nauman was busted for indecent exposure, a misdemeanor, and booked into the county jail. He was released later that day upon posting $500 bond. That's it? $500 for wrapping it in a chain? The officer's complete interaction with Nauman on March 9th was recorded on a body-worn camera. I can't wait till they release that one in theaters. That's all I got to say. That should be a lot of fun. Let's move on. That's what the cop said. Let's move on. Let's just keep going. Speaking of that being in theaters, we've got a story about a man in theaters. Pulling a peewee, if you will.
Oh.
A man is arrested, Mally, after pleasuring himself to Kristen Stewart's Love Lies Bleeding.
Oh, yeah, I heard that movie's very graphic.
Yes. We go to Detroit.
Oh, of course.
The only place where they do this, I guess.
Know, I'm thinking I'm safe with the grocery stores, the beaches, and then you hit me with the movie theaters.
Yes, no.
Dang it.
You should probably not go see this movie in your area.
Yeah.
At least not yet. A man was arrested after he was caught pleasuring himself and then falling asleep while at a screening of Kristen Stewart's new film, Love Lies Bleeding. The moviegoer went to MJR Southgate Cinema in suburban Detroit.
God, that's 5 minutes from my house. Actually, 10 minutes, but that's like the next town over. And I do go to that one. Son of a biscuit.
You better bring some wet wipes and a towel.
I do go to that one. Dang it. I'm going to have to go to the one that's over by the mall.
Bring the Clorox wipes and the towel.
Oh, my
Mally.
God. I'm going to have to tell Derek that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's the closest movie theater to me. Because when MJR, there's this song that they do in the beginning of the movies and everyone claps to it. There's this clap part. If you're from Michigan, you know what I'm talking about. But he was clapping something.
What's the song? Keep your dick in your pants. Just keep your dick in your pants.
Son of a biscuit, I can't believe that's right.
I know it's going to be a long movie. Keep your dick in your pants.
Yeah, because they just got those new chairs where they're like recliners.
I bet they vibrate too.
Dang nabbit. God.
The moviegoer, which goes to Mally's movie theater in suburban Detroit, went to watch Stewart's moving picture and clearly enjoyed the movie, perhaps a little bit too much.
Oh, my God.
Love Lies Bleeding is considered a sexual film, as it tells the story of a pair of lesbian lovers set in the world of bodybuilding. Oh, he just couldn't get enough of that, could he?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The man in question went to see one of the first showings, but was soon taken into custody by officers after movie patrons caught him with his penis out, sleeping in his recliner.
See, I told you they had recliners.
Yes, they do. He was reclined a little too far back, if you know what I mean. The Southgate Police Department responded to MJR Southgate Cinema just after 9 p.m. local time on Thursday for a disorderly person who was intoxicated and refusing to leave the business, if you know what I mean.
Oh, man.
33 years old, by the way. Upon arrival, officers encountered a 33-year-old white male subject who was passed out inside one of the movie theaters, the release stated. The male was subsequently taken into custody by officers for possession of narcotics, indecent exposure, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. A not safe for work photo of the man in question was shared on X, if you want to see it. In the pic, the individual is seen asleep in his reclining movie theater chair with his goods exposed, so you can truly judge him if you'd like. The image was posted by Twitter X user @UglyXKorean. So go ahead and look it up. Went to go see, and this is the quote, who shared, went to go see Love Lies Bleeding, and this drunk guy jacked himself off to sleep. Oh, that's nice. If you examine the image, you will see several times on the table next to him, including 2 small bottles of liquor, a pack of cigarettes, and his movie ticket. Well, he had a complete evening then, didn't he?
Right.
Yeah. Even had a cigarette afterwards. Police confirmed to Variety, who first reported the news, that the individual is still in police custody as of Friday morning. So he got an overnight in the pen.
Yeah.
Wow, you got to sleep it off. Love Lies Bleeding is Kristen Stewart's latest movie, which she says was really exciting to film. I love that it felt a bit like mythology, like a comic booky throwback 80s. Rose makes this audacious and singular, unique experience personal for us and let us be our own individuals and just like traipse all over her thing, Stewart added while speaking to the Associated Press. It's so fun to work with people who are like cuckoo birds, but also really concerted. The actress continued to explain how in movies, somehow girls are kind of expected to make everyone feel really comfortable. Evidently, this guy was really comfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that is a very default setting for women in general. And in this case, it was like, yeah, but what if I'm bleeped and my rage is boiling out and bubbling over? And it also really turns me on to share that with another person, she said of Love Lies Bleeding. Katie O'Brien, who stars alongside Stewart, added, it wasn't like just about resilience or just about one thing. There's so much that you can read into if you want to, which I think is cool, or you just can watch it and have fun. Well, this guy watched it and had a little fun, didn't he? I mean, yeah. So there you go. Love Lies Bleeding first debuted at this year's Sundance Film Festival and has already created a strong impression amongst critics. Variety critic Owen Gleiberman said that the movie turns wild and garish, and you may think the film is losing control, yet director Rose Glass is fiercely in control of what she's doing. She made a midnight noir that shoots over the top of our expectations, but lands where it should, at a place where even valorous people have to go to extremes. Adam Nyman, who writes for The Ringer, says the film proves sturdy enough to hang 2 movies at once. One, a raw, bloody neo-noir a la Jim Thompson. The other, a shapely, revisionist sexploitation riff designed for maximum multiplex transgression. Love Lies Bleeding is currently playing in theaters nationwide. Please bring a raincoat and an umbrella.
Apparently, and some wipes.
And some wipes, yes. Bring your
man.
Clorox wipes. So there you go. Speaking of jerking the gherkin, Mally, we go to Florida.
I can't believe it's like the next town over.
It is, yeah.
And I go to that one.
Yep. If you stick to the floor, you know it's not just... Yeah, You know, it's not just
soda.
the soda and the Juji fruits. There you go.
They didn't tell us what screen it was, did they?
No. No, but love doesn't leave you just lying bleeding. It also leaves you sticky and
icky.
Yeah. We go to Florida on this one, where a man is arrested for touching himself and groping an EMS paramedic during transport.
Oh, jeez.
By the way, tell this one to the mister as well, if you will.
Yeah.
It's a double feature. This, by the way, is our last story of the day. I figured we'd leave on this note.
Yeah, thank you.
It's kind of a double nightmare scenario for you, Mal. I'm just saying. A Florida man was arrested last week after he allegedly touched an EMS paramedic inappropriately while he was being taken to the hospital. According to an arrest report obtained by NBC affiliate WBBH, police were called to the Cancer Center Alliance of Naples after they received multiple reports that a man refused to leave the building and locked himself in the bathroom. When police arrived, they found 34-year-old Frederick Lloyd Day in the bathroom, standing next to a pile of paper towels. Oh, boy. WBBH said Day had reportedly been complaining about foot pain and claimed that he was bitten by a bug. Okay. Collier County EMS arrived to take him to Naples Comprehensive Health Downtown Hospital for treatment. However, NCH staff did not allow the 34-year-old to enter due to disorderly and destructive behavior. The arrest report shows that officers saw Day strapped to a stretcher with a notable erect penis showing through his basketball shorts. The report goes on to show that Day was touching himself inappropriately while the Collier County EMS paramedic took his blood. It's at this point I'll stop and ask if Mr. Fox has ever had this happen to him. Or has
I
he
know,
ever
I'll have
told
to
you?
see if they've ever copped a feel on him. Usually he's the driver, though. He's usually not in the back, but I'll have to ask him.
Yeah, see? The paramedic told him to stop and take his hands out of his pants, and that's when he attempted to reach for the victim's legs.
Oh.
Here we go. WBBH said the victim told Day, "Do not touch me." But Day looked into their eyes and continued touching himself inappropriately and also touched the victim's upper thigh.
Oh, God, that's just uneasy. He's making eye contact while doing it. Oh!
He's like, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me.
I know.
The victim grabbed Day's hand and repeated, "Do not touch me." According to WBBH, a Naples Fire Department lieutenant saw the interaction and stated that Day continued to try and touch the victim by removing medical equipment and even unbuckled himself from the stretcher. While on his way to Naples Jail Center, WBBH said Day managed to move his handcuffed hands from the back to the front and unbuckled his seatbelt. He was booked into the jail where he was charged with battery on unspecified personnel. So there you go, a little something to share with the mister tonight, Mally.
Oh, my goodness.
2 stories, very uncomfortable.
Just a tiny bit.
Just a wee bit.
Ugh.
So when he walks in the door tonight, just say, "Honey, boy, have I got something to share for you from work tonight." Yeah. So there you go. So Mally, what's going on lately with paranormalgirl.com?
I'm trying to think. Nothing much, though, but check it out, paranormalgirl.com, because I think I'm going to be posting some stuff as soon as I get everything organized. And also Strange Evidence on Discovery Channel, yes, Discovery Plus.
Discovery Plus, yes, indeed. And by the way, folks, if you can catch any of the marathons, that's the word I'm looking for, marathons on the Science Channel, do so as well. You know what aired the other night on Travel Channel was a marathon of Paranormal Night Shift.
Oh, really?
I was shocked.
Huh.
Yeah. So it was late at night too, which is probably the best way to view yours truly. Late at night. It'll scare the pants off you. I mean, not like that. I mean, we've been reading plenty of those stories. But yeah, I was editing the other night, and there I was in horrible color. But yeah, Paranormal Night Shift was on the other night. It was right around. I think the marathon was on from. I want to say it was 9 to 2 Central Time. Yeah, so yeah, it was a little later at night, but they had a little mini Paranormal Night Shift marathon going on.
I like those marathons because life is so busy that you tend to not see a lot of these shows, or you'll just get like one episode out of each and you kind of miss everything. And so it's nice to see these marathons because then you can catch up and be like, oh my gosh, I really like this. And then you continue with other seasons. Because when I first started in the paranormal world, I was like glued to the TV. Every paranormal show, I was watching it. And then as time goes on and life gets busy, it's just I stopped watching the shows. So
yeah,
that's why I like to catch up.
I got to get a hold of Tobin and see if they'll do a second season of that, because they've been getting some mileage out of that initial season of Paranormal Night Shift.
That's good.
Yeah. So.
But I heard that they're going to slow down on the paranormal shows, at least on cable.
That's what I heard too. But you know, they've aired that one season of Paranormal Night Shift so much that you would think that they'd do another season. Mm-hmm. I mean, it really didn't cost that much to produce. So who knows? Maybe I'll get Richard Estep together and we'll lobby. We'll lobby Discovery to make another season. But yeah, so there's that going on. I'm up at KNSI this weekend. So KNSIradio.com from 7 to 9 and whatnot. Tomorrow on the big show, Supernatural News and a little bit of paranormal potpourri. We have to call an audible because our guest Pam Dennis, her aunt is sick. So she had to cancel this weekend. She had to cancel on Thursday. So she'll be unavailable on Thursday. So we're going to call an audible on Thursday. So we'll have a different guest for you on Thursday. So there you go. But that's the week ahead. So there you go. So Supernatural News tomorrow. Want to thank our guest, Doug Kari, today. The Berman Murders is the name of the book, and it is a fascinating book at that. I want you to take a look at that. We have a link in the description of this show, and an absolutely amazing story. I want you guys to check that out. The Berman Murders is available in the description of this show. From Allie Fox, I'm Tim Dennis. Thank you so much for tuning in today to the best in true crime podcasting. You've been listening to True Crime Tuesday.